Who appeared to Joshua before Israel's invasion of Jericho? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of Joshua on Walking Through the Bible. Today we're going to be discussing Joshua 5 verses 8 to 15, but before we do that, let's read the passage. If you have a Bible with you, you can turn to Joshua chapter 5 verse 8, but if you don't have a Bible, don't worry, just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So Joshua 5, beginning at verse 8. So it was, when they had finished circumcising all the people, that they stayed in their place in the camp till they were healed. Then the Lord said to Joshua, "This day I have rolled away the reproach of Egypt from you. Therefore the name of the place is called Gilgal till this day." Now the children of Israel camped in Gilgal and kept the Passover on the 14th day of the month at twilight on the plains of Jericho. And they ate of the produce of the land on the day after the Passover, unleavened bread and parched grain on the very same day. Then the manna ceased on the day after they had eaten the produce of the land, and the children of Israel no longer had manna, but they ate of the food of the land of Canaan that year. And it came to pass, when Joshua was by Jericho, that he lifted his eyes and looked, and behold, a man stood opposite with him, with his sword drawn in his hand. And Joshua went to him and said to him, "Are you for us, or for our adversaries?" So he answered, "No, but as commander of the army of the Lord, I have now come." And Joshua fell on his face to the earth and worshipped, and said to him, "What does my Lord say to his servant?" Then the commander of the Lord's army said to Joshua, "Take your sandal off your foot, for the place where you stand is holy." And Joshua did so. In our last lesson, we had Israel in Gilgal, with Joshua being told to circumcise all the males in the second generation since leaving Egypt who had not been circumcised. We discussed two possible reasons for why circumcision wasn't practiced in the wilderness, one of convenience and one of a severed covenant relationship with God due to their rebellion. For a more in-depth discussion of that, we refer you to the last lesson, the links for which are available on the end screen of this lesson, if you're watching on YouTube, or on our website at eastendchurch.org under the Media/WTTB English Podcast tab if you're watching on another platform. Having now completed the task, time was needed for these men to heal, as this is a quite painful procedure, especially for adults who would actually remember the pain. In verse 9, God tells Joshua that day, the day that all the men were circumcised, that he rolled away the reproach of Egypt from you. What reproach is being spoken of here? The reproach of being slaves. The reproach of likely being mocked by the Egyptians if it was mentioned by Israel that their God would set them free. All that would be removed by what the Lord was about to do in giving Israel the land of Canaan. Because the Lord rolled the reproach of Egypt away here is why the place is called Gilgal, the name of which means rolling. While Israel was encamped in Gilgal, recall, they got here on the 10th day of the first month of the year. In other words, the day that the Passover lamb would be chosen. Well, on the 14th day of the month at evening, the Israelites kept the Passover in the plains of Jericho. Which brings us to another reason that the males needed to be circumcised, which is because anyone who was uncircumcised couldn't eat the Passover. We know this because Exodus chapter 12, verse 48 says, "And when a stranger dwells with you and wants to keep the Passover to the Lord, let all his males be circumcised, and then let him come near and keep it, and he shall be as a native of the land, for no uncircumcised person shall eat it." Thus, by telling us that the second generation had not been circumcised, that would also imply that Israel did not keep the Passover during their time in the wilderness either, for the last Passover we have recorded is the one observed right before leaving Sinai. Now, we can't know this for certain, but the implication is highly likely. Thus, this further strengthens our case as to why the book of Deuteronomy was needed, in order to instruct this second generation again what was expected of them under the law, including the law of circumcision and the keeping of the feast of the Lord. After the Passover, of course, begins the feast of unleavened bread, and it is said that the people ate of the fruit of the land on this day, unleavened bread and parched grain. It is here that God stopped providing them manna from heaven, for now they had access to food. Recall also that only days earlier, Joshua had given instructions for Israel to take provisions for their journey, and we saw this ending of the manna foreshadowed. God only miraculously provided for Israel while it was needed. Going forward, he would still provide for them, but would do so through natural means. Coming to verses 13 through the end of the chapter, we have a story that probably should have been placed at the beginning of chapter 6. What we have is Joshua by Jericho, seemingly alone, when he lifted up his eyes, and behold, a man stood opposite him with his sword drawn in his hand. Now, it is only natural that Joshua wanted to know if this man was a friend or a foe. The man replied that he was a commander of the army of the Lord, who has now come to aid Israel in battle. The question that people have is, who is this man? Some believe it was an angel, perhaps like the archangel Michael, who is seen in Revelation 12 verse 7, battling the forces of Satan. Others, though, come to a different conclusion, that this is God himself, perhaps even a manifestation of Jesus. Are there scriptures to support this? Well, we'll leave the context for a moment to note that God has directly appeared to man before in the form of that man could see, even in the form of a man. He did so to Abraham in Genesis 18, to Hagar in Genesis 16, to Jacob in Genesis 32, and to Moses in Exodus 3. So we cannot dismiss this as being God simply because he took the form of a man. Nor can we dismiss that the member of the Godhead present is Jesus, for in Revelation 6, Jesus is pictured as a conqueror, even though we're dealing in highly symbolic language here. So returning to Joshua 5, do we get a clue? And the answer is yes. Joshua bows down to worship this man, and the man accepts worship. In Revelation 22 verse 9, in response to John worshiping the angel that revealed to him the things found in the book, the angel wouldn't accept his worship, telling John that he was just a messenger and that John needed to worship God. But here in Joshua 5, the man accepts worship, so this man must be a manifestation of God. Whether this is Jesus or the Father, I cannot say, but in the end it doesn't matter, for both the Father and Jesus are God, and as God, he is certainly the captain of the Lord's army, for it is his army. To add to this, God told Joshua to do the same thing that he told Moses at the burning bush. Remove your sandals, for the place where you stand is holy. The land isn't holy because it's the promised land. No, the land is holy because Joshua was in the presence of God. We'll begin to discuss the actual conquering of Jericho, the Lord willing, in the next lesson. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of Joshua chapter 6, verses 1 to 14, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time.
Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.